I'm Peter Giel, and we've been doing this thing for half a year now, something like that. Yeah, and since last summer. And we started doing this weekly lunch meeting where we present scripts that are waiting to be told. So, of course, we all have scripts. There's many scripts in science, and they've been researched and written down and whatever. But there's also many scripts that aren't being researched and written down, and but out there in people's minds and in people's lives, in stories. And that's what we want to give this stage as an opportunity to to bring forth these stories and present them, because we believe that it's important to have them somewhere. And meanwhile, we've been building up a database of recordings of these presentations, and they're all you can find them on the Spiral Lab website. So what was pretty amazing stories out there. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and you can introduce yourself maybe. Yeah, thank you.
Well, you all know me, I think. I'm Ivan. I'm a member of the Decolonial Futures Lab, I think.
I'm Alien. I'm also a member of the Decolonial Lab.
I'm Annika. I'm also a member of the Decolonial Lab.
Yeah, and today's presentation is about a decolonial critique of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And our focus here was really to figure out, like, whose development do they mean, and whose future are we planning? Are they planning? And so we're focusing on, in partnership with the Regeneration Collective, we're focusing on critiquing this system. So
Yes, so 3 years ago, we founded our lab, which is yes. Yes, so 3 years ago, we founded this lab as a space for advancing critique, inquiry, and collaborative experimentation to address coloniality in knowledge and institutional practices. And what we do together is examine different decolonial approaches to education and learning. And part of that is our discourse analysis, which we'll be presenting today. We also envision regenerative futures through a decolonial lens and engage in meaningful dialogue and experiments regarding decoloniality. And we also organize some events. So this is an exhibition where we kind of explored our own relationship with colonialism and decolonialism and learning and unlearning different aspects of us and our identities. How do I switch? Oh, like that. Okay. So why did we decide to analyze the SDG agenda? One of the goals of the Decolonial Lab is to decolonize education, and the SDGs are a core part of many universities and different institutions because they influence global policies, funding, and they're often presented as neutral and universal for everyone. But the way the problems are framed shape how we understand them, and therefore also what solutions we come up with. So this is really important.
Yes, and to get you started and also get the critical thinking started, please scan the QR code and join the Mentimeter. Because we're going to have a little introduction about the SDGs. Yes, let's see if that works now. Stop. And then we're gonna share. Yes. No, we won't. No, wait, sorry.
Go to screens.
Yes, Mentimeter, here we go. You're right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's there. No, you have to full screen it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Okay. Everyone in? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. First question, how many SDGs are there? Let's see. 17 SDGs. And most of you got it right. And so we have 17 SDGs and 169 targets. And the SDGs were adopted in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly. Okay, next one. Next question. Which word appears more often in the document? Environmental or economic? Yeah. So, right, economic.
Yeah,
Surprise.
that was the reason why.
It's actually like a huge contrast because economic was mentioned 61 times and environmental 19. So this also like raises the important point because despite the sustainability narrative, the agenda appears to really prioritize the economic thinking, which then raises the question of how environmental issues are actually addressed. Yeah, you see that. Okay, next question. How often is the word development used? It's a guessing question. About, yes.
No.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. One person was right. Yay! So development is technically the core words and core. Yeah, core values of the whole document. So it was also a guessing question. I think no one is counting the whole words in the whole document. Okay, next one. Which two words are not used in the document? Not used. Focus on that.
After would be none of
Yep. Okay. Yes.
Equity
And redistribution is not used.
So I just, I did one right.
Yeah.
But I didn't think about equity. I thought it was.
We were also surprised, yes. When we analyzed the whole agenda, we found it really striking that a document that is about transformation, partnership, global responsibility, and justice, then it's like not used that there's equity and redistribution. So yeah. This also raises then the question which the agenda is, if the agenda is truly challenging the current narrative or not, and if it's actually challenging the status quo. Yeah. Okay, next question. How are global problems mainly framed?
Yeah. Maybe. But it's also.
Nothing finishing.
Everyone put it in?
Yes. No, I can just.
Okay.
With the deposit.
Yes. So the problems are mainly framed as technical and managemental challenges, which makes them easy to manage.
Yeah.
And then it's easier to really manage the symptoms instead of also again challenging the status quo. Also really striking that it is framed as managemental challenges. Okay. Question: which idea is treated as common sense in the SDG agenda?
Common sense. And you read them now.
Can you read?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting the gist of it.
Nice.
Getting the gist of it.
Yeah, so economic growth leads to development.
Yeah.
That's treated as a common sense. So that's the underlying assumptions of the whole agenda. And this also, again, really questions, which made it super powerful because does it? Probably not. So it was interesting to find out. And then last question. What is presented as the main solution? Okay. You are right. Better coordination and partnerships. And then I would like to invite you to think about which partnerships, what coordination and partnerships between whom.
And what does it mean?
What does it mean? Exactly, because that is not defined in the document. Yes. Perfect. Thank you so much. That was the introduction. And we will switch to the presentation again. If I find my mouse. Yeah. Good.
Change here.
Yes. And start. Centimeter.
Presentation.
Where did the presentation go? That's a big question. Mentimeter here, I think.
Yeah.
I think we have it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the, yes.
Okay. There? No.
Click on the next part of the screen. Yeah. Yeah.
No. Good.
Okay.
So now we'll present you our critical discourse analysis. But before that, I need to explain a bit the framework which we used in order to analyze the SDGs. So we used a collaborative experimental approach along with the iceberg model. So this is kind of how we applied our analysis. Oh, yes. Yes, it's, oh.
Yeah.
Is it visible? Can you see it? I hope so. Yes, but before that, I want to give acknowledgement to the founders of our lab, Shweta, Silva staff, Bel Kirchhoff Parnell, and Ilse Roos, and everyone who worked on the analysis. Aditi Gupta, Elisaveta Stanova, Ivan Bols, Annie Careers, Avita Krustiv, Carla Lohman, Vidushi Srivastav, Alina Strasser, and Anna Mine. We used the framework, which focuses on what's the represented problem to be. And this is really important because it's not about what the problem is, but how they frame the problem to us. So their perception of what the problem is. And yeah, with this lab and this experimental session, we work together as a group to kind of navigate that. Yeah, to give an example for what the represented problem is. For example, a represented problem could be lack of access to quality education. So people not being in school, not receiving the right skills. But this suggests that the solution should be improving access, standardizing curricula, and better preparing people for the labor market. But it leaves out questions like whose knowledge is being taught, whose perspectives are prioritized, and how education systems themselves might reproduce inequality. And afterwards, yes, it also represents, yeah, we also explore the assumptions underlying the represented problem to be, which is what we're going to get into now. So
Okay, so our key findings. So looking at the SDG agenda, one of our key findings was that they come from a very Western perspective, and they view a lot of their core ideas or frameworks as the status quo, which places sort of a dominance over non-Western countries or global South partners, where the United Nations especially focuses on like growth, and that non-Western partner countries need to catch up essentially. But they're very focused on this sort of idea that economics is sort of the driver of change rather than the effect of it. So, and this can be found. So colonial universalism is the idea that I just mentioned about whose knowledge becomes universal. In the United Nations sense, a lot of the Western views show like the standards that are developed. So that like one model of development for all assumes shared values and goals and creates standards. So the impacts of universalism. Universalism imposes that there's one path to progress. So for instance, we have mapped the road to sustainable development. It will be for all of us to ensure that the journey is successful and that its gains are irreversible. So this idea of we map the road to sustainable development, it really imposes one path to progress. This erases a local and indigenous knowledge. For instance, all people, irrespective of sex, age, gender, race, ethnicity, and persons with disabilities, migrants, and indigenous peoples, children, and youth, especially in those vulnerable situations, should have access to lifelong learning opportunities to help them acquire knowledge and skills needed to exploit opportunities to participate fully in society. This reinforces global power hierarchies because, for instance, all countries take action with developed countries taking the lead, taking into account the development and capabilities of developing countries. So this leads us to the development catch-up model, which sees the world split into developed versus developing. Deficit catch-up model shows that Western countries set the standard and other countries have to catch up. For instance, we recognize that will include mobilization of financial resources as well as capacity building to transfer of environmentally sound technology to developing countries on favorable terms. Addressing that they're trying to intensify their efforts to strengthen statistical capacities in developing countries, particularly in African countries, or least developed countries, and landlocked developing countries, small islands, states, and middle income countries. So they're really splitting the world into us versus them through this sort of status quo. So this shows that the United Nations really focuses on people that are defined by what they lack. So if they lack income, if they lack education, if they lack access to resources, then they are automatically seen as sort of lesser than more developed countries. And so this enforces the idea that dignity is defined by status, economic status. And that isn't necessarily true. What is assumed is that growth is the solution. There are universal standards of development and dignity, and that the problem is technical and managerial. However, there's a lot more nuance to problems than in reality than what they face. And so, yeah. So what is silenced is indigenous knowledge, historical responsibility, diversity in lifestyles, and alternative economies that put people first rather than economics first. And this brings us to flipping the narrative, which Ellie will present our map of how we flipped to bring mental models to the forefront rather than events and economic status and these things. Yeah.
Yes, so first we as a mental model, we also as a what is missing is pluralism. And pluralism is defined by an understanding that multiple perspectives can coexist, and the UN should take more time to understand diverse perspective and also the outputs, and also should reflect more on how to implement pluralism in the development goals or in the goals of the UN. And the decolonial approach then should be based on pluralism and really integrate different perspectives. And also the underlying structure of this is space for alternative models of living, for example, and also that a decolonial framework is emphasizing on community and acknowledge, for example, in general, togetherness and also place-based governance. And the center of that should be voices of indigenous people, small state islands, and marginalized communities. As we heard before, those voices were mainly put outside of the SDGs because it was focusing more on the Western countries. So by putting those voices actively in and also really emphasize the perspective of marginalized communities, pluralism can be achieved. Yes, so really, really important. And also the post-developmental approach. So the post-developmental approach means that it's a critique on the goal of countries and regions for development. So by focusing on the post-developmental approach, we can change underlying structures, for example, in language to shift away from the colonial categorization, and also consider who benefits and who does not, and also how progress is measured with whom it is defined. And it really should focus on a post-growth, decolonial, feminist, justice-oriented framework. And challenge the patriarchy and the growth narrative. So also super important.
Then we have Gaia centricism, which is more about placing nature at the center of how we interpret, understand, and process our surroundings. And there needs to be a switch in the mental model. So instead of controlling nature and how do we dominate over nature or use its resources and exploit it, we move to the concept of we are one with nature and the living ecosystems. And an example of that would be, for example, multi-species perspectives, which aim to erase the ecological divide between humans and nature. So instead, humans and non-human perspectives are interconnected, interdependent, and interrelated. Yes. Yeah. Then we have decentralized approaches. So this mental model represents decentralized governance approaches, which bridge the gap between the theoretical SDGs and actually implementing them, especially when it comes to decision-making processes and accountability. And it's about focusing on local, co-defined, bottom-up approaches that shift to co-governance. Yes, then we have a poem by an Indian poet. Now you have reached the village road when the entire village has gone to the city. The road smiled. You're truly so innocent, brother. At least the stones, wood, and chalk are left. Yes, and now we have some Q&A time and discussion.